Yeah, let's start. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone in our audience from all over the world. I'm Dr. Jamie Dai from Mindray IVD Innovation Center, Minnesota. I'm pleased to be a host today. I would like to welcome you to our ChemTalk Webinar Episode 4, How BS-600M Empowers Your Lab with Accurate Tests. In May of this year, Mindray launched the BS-600M, a powerful yet efficient chemistry analyzer that is designed to empower medium-volume lab with increased productivity, efficiency, and reliability. After launch, we received many positive feedbacks from our customers. In today's webinar, we're fortunately able to invite Professor Dr. Kausar Adley, Mr. Zilin Sun, and Mr. Junki Seo to present very interesting topics on total quality management in clinical chemistry, role of IQC and EQA. Second topic is technical design to improve BS-600M performance, and a comparison and evaluation biochemistry on Mindray BS-600M versus Roche Cobas C8000 system. The allocation of time are the following. We have 3 speakers with 3 topics. Each one has about 20 to 30 minutes. We will leave questions and answers at the end of webinar. The audience can send your questions in Zoom chat window at the Q&A section. We will accommodate these questions. At the end, we will display a QR code for attendance certificate. Those after all. First, let me introduce Dr. Kausar Adley. He is the current president of IFCC, and he is also fellow of Canadian Academy of Clinical Biochemistry, fellow of AACC Academy of Clinical Biochemistry, diplomats of American Board of Clinical Chemistry. He's holding the following positions: is head of clinical biochemistry in the Department of Pediatric Laboratory Medicine, the Hospital for Sick Children, University of Toronto, senior scientist in the Molecular Medicine Program of the Research Institute, a full professor in the Departments of Laboratory Medicine and Pathobiology, Biochemistry, Physiology at the University of Toronto. He is also a director of point-of-care testing program at Sick Kids and vice chair of quality in LMP at the University of Toronto. The editor-in-chief of Critical Reviews Clinical Laboratory Sciences, is a principal investigator of CALIPER, Canadian Laboratory Initiative, and Pediatric Reference Interval Database. That program is aimed at the establishment of laboratory reference interval database for biomarkers of pediatric health and disease. He has numerous other appointments in the past, and he also has been actively involved in both basic and clinical chemistry research since 1988, with over 300 published articles and abstracts in the field of lipids, lipoproteins, metabolism, diabetic dyslipidemia, and metabolic disorders. His achievements have been recognized through numerous awards. I'm not going to list all of them because of too many. In summary, he is a very well-known person for his extensive national and international contributions over the past 30 years into the clinical laboratory services, research, and education. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Adley for his fascinating presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dai, for that kind introduction. I'm going to share my slides. If you unshare, then I can share. Okay, great. Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you again for that kind introduction. Um, I'm pleased to be here to give an overview of quality in the clinical labs, particularly in clinical chemistry. As you know, a lot of the guidelines around quality management and quality assurance have been written largely focused on clinical chemistry. Clinical chemistry labs are very much experienced with quality control, quality assurance, and total quality management, also called quality systems. So I'm happy to share some of my experience. I'll give you some overview of some of the guidelines and models that have been proposed, and then talk about three major phases where quality management is critical. One is called pre-analytical phase, the other called analytical phase, and also importantly, equally important is post-analytical phase, something that we do not always appreciate. The focus of most labs is really just on the analytical phase, whereas really one needs to be aware of all three phases, which are part of the total quality management. So first, a little bit about clinical chemistry lab services. Well, as you know, clinical chemistry is a broad term. It actually includes many, many areas of testing. For example, in our hospital, I've listed some of the areas I'm responsible for as the head of clinical chemistry in our hospital. I'm responsible for routine and stat chemistry, for specialized chemistry, special services, for example, using mass spectrometry to do very complex testing, immunology service, serology testing. This has been particularly important recently because of the coronavirus and COVID-19 pandemic. We have been involved in a lot of serological testing. Endocrinology, where you do a lot of hormone testing and endocrine marker testing. TDM, or drug monitoring, really important in support of patient care. And emergency and forensic toxicology. So we actually do a lot of emergency toxicology. We do drugs of abuse monitoring. So you can see that chemistry is very much a very broad area, and it's a very tends to involve many types of instrumentation and platforms. And so quality has always been very important, mostly because chemistry is a type of quantitative lab service. And being quantitative, it has required special attention to quality control and quality assurance. Now, quality is clearly important, critically important to the role of the lab. This slide here on the left here, I'm summarizing how central and important lab is in clinical service. This is not as well appreciated by the public or by some of our professional colleagues, but it's true that labs play critical roles in identifying risk factors and symptoms, diagnosing disease, determining appropriate treatment for disease, even evaluating response to treatment requires a lot of lab testing. But to play this central role, the quality is critical. And quality means both analytical quality and total quality systems, which means you managing every step of the process, the lab process, even selecting the right instruments, selecting the right method, validating those methods, and then assuring quality operations by performing quality control using appropriate models. But I also want to emphasize that part of the quality is appropriate interpretation. It's no use to perform high quality testing if you do not appropriately report and interpret your results. So this is unfortunately not as well appreciated by many labs, where the reference intervals or reference ranges that are used, whether it's adults or children, tend to be outdated, tend to be in some cases inaccurate. So all of the attention is paid to the quality management in the lab, but the reporting aspect is not as well appreciated as being equally important. So I wanted to emphasize and take this opportunity to mention that not only quality within the lab is important, but how you report and how you interpret your results is really important. And so ensuring that you have up-to-date reference ranges or reference intervals is important. Now, what is total quality management? Well, it's referred to as a systematic and process-oriented efforts that are essential to meet quality standards. Quality, this is a sort of one definition of quality that has been offered, and that is the quality of the lab testing process depends on the providing the totality of features and characteristics that conform to the stated or implied needs of users or customers. This was actually the definition that was provided by CDC, Center for Disease Control in the US back in 1986, and it still applies, although there are other similar definitions. And what is quality management? Well, it's a complex process that involves many elements, components, and essentials, and requires careful organization and implementation. Now, in terms of when you look at total quality management or quality systems, you for any systems, including the Mindray system, but also every other analyzer that in your lab, you require, first of all, an overall quality system plan, but within that, a quality assurance plan and quality control. But again, quality control is really only one component of the total quality management. And so this diagram nicely shows that, depicts that quality system is the larger plan that you have to ensure total quality management. But within that, you need a plan for quality assurance at different steps of the process. And then, of course, you need appropriate quality control testing during the lab operation. Now, the Westgard group and colleagues, as you know, James Westgard and colleagues have actually provided a number of guidelines over the last few decades, which have been very helpful to this field of quality assurance and quality control. What they indicate that achievement of quality is a complex process that takes well-planned and well-managed activities. And that quality control, as I mentioned, is just one component that is essential for quality assurance. And the model that has been commonly proposed is the CLSI model. Those who are not familiar, CLSI is Clinical Laboratory Standards Institute. It is a US-based organization, but it is accepted worldwide, and many of the CLSI guidelines are used globally. So CLSI Quality Management System, also called QMS, model has been proposed as one model that could be used that provides the big picture that describes all necessary activities in a medical lab to guarantee the quality of lab tests and services. And the Westgard and his and colleagues have recommended a systematic and process-oriented approach to quality management. And they call it the PDCA cycle, which is plan, do, check, and act. And the key components of this process is, first of all, planning the appropriate quality model and process, ensuring you have quality lab processes. Well, that's quite a broad term, but really means efficient and quality operations in the lab, ensuring you have the best system in place. So in terms of, so when selecting the instrument or reagent, ensuring you have the best possible assay available, you have appropriately validated that system, and then appropriately managing the operation so that it's efficient and of high quality. And then to assess, to monitor that process, you do quality control, and then you also assess the performance of quality control testing, and then continually try to improve quality. So this is called a cycle that is being recommended. And all of these components are actually centered on the quality goals or objectives and requirements to be achieved by the medical lab. Now, in terms of guidelines, there have been a number of guidelines published, but they tend to be from different organizations. These two organizations have been particularly active in providing guidelines around quality management and quality systems, and that includes CLSI, I mentioned, and ISO, International Standard Organization. So ISO and CLSI, I'm sure all of you are familiar, have published several guidelines and standards that provide guidance on best lab practices that should be implemented in the lab. And then, so once labs have established a quality system model and follow these guidelines, then they need to be inspected and accredited. So the inspection process and accreditation system is also equally important. So ensuring that every country and every region has appropriate accreditation system and regular inspections of quality management is also important. Now, when we say quality control, it's been also referred to as statistical quality control. And the statistical quality control is somewhat different than the statistical process control. So the definition of the statistical quality control is a procedure in which stable samples are measured and observed results compared with limits that describe the variation expected when the measurement method is working properly. So this is based on a guideline that many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with, is called CLSI C24A3. And fortunately, safe quality control materials have been available in the field of clinical chemistry and for most established tests, although there are some tests that still require new, better or improved quality materials, but most do have good quality material available. And the strategies have been refined based on quality and productivity and cost effectiveness of the analytical system, our analytical testing process. Now, labs need to develop a quality control plan. And I'm sure many of you already do, but there are many guidelines that can help with this kind of sort of planning, and that is to develop a process that is either, it's being recommended by the Westgard group again, that either you have two options, either implement a risk-based individualized quality control plan or a total quality control plan. But in practice, the risk-based individualized quality control plan is more difficult because individualized quality control plans may not always be valid, since it is difficult to perform a proper risk assessment. Our hospital lab, for example, has started this process in the last few years, where we actually do try to do risk management and risk assessment of every method and every process in the lab. But it is a very complicated process that we actually have our own quality systems group. There are 4 of them that 4 full-time staff that actually manage the quality system and monitor risk of every step of the process. But it is certainly helpful, but it is time-consuming and costly to manage. Now, this is a model that has been proposed. I'll just summarize it for you because of sake of time. There is a lot of publications by Westgard and other groups on this process. Now, in North America, where I'm more familiar with, is guidelines tend to be either CLIA guidelines, and CLIA guidelines are mostly used in the US. In Canada, we actually have our own the system called IQMH, or Institute for Quality Management in Healthcare, which is similar to CLIA. ISO, on the other hand, is a global organization, and many of you are familiar with the ISO guidelines, and there are a number of them that are actually widely followed internationally around the world. And there have been many rules that have been applied to managing quality control, but the 2SD rule is commonly used in US and Canadian labs to judge whether an analytical process is in control or out of control. This is actually the Westgard rules that many of you, I'm sure, are using, which is commonly used. We use it in our hospital. This is an older decision tree, but it's still quite widely used in quality control review and assessment, where you basically look at you usually perform 2 levels of quality control, sometimes 3 levels, and you look at what rule has been met, and if your 2S rule is fine and you have passed the 2S rule, you can actually accept your run and release your results. But if you have a flag, a 2S rule flag, then you look at other rules, and you depending on what rule is broken, or what flags you have, you may not accept or reject that run, and may have to repeat your quality control. You may have to recalibrate. So these rules have been very important in managing and assessing your quality control process. Now, more recently, in the last decade or so, there have been a focus on using Six Sigma rules or to actually manage this process. So this is a revised guideline by the Westgard group, where they are recommending that you actually use Six Sigma. And I've defined here what Six Sigma is actually comes from auto industry and some other industry, where they actually use the Sigma level to define the number of potential errors that occur. So what you're doing is you're looking at the rate of errors to determine how well you're doing. So approach has been recommended that the approach should be optimized to assure detection of medically important errors. So in healthcare and in lab testing, you want to ensure that you catch as many errors as possible and you have minimal number of errors. So Six Sigma is defined as having 3.4 defects per million opportunities. That means 3.4 errors per million tests, for example. Well, then this is a high level of quality that is typically achieved. And actually, there are many current instrumentation are, if you have lower sigma performance, so 5 sigma, 4 sigma, or 3 sigma, then you require more strict quality assurance process and quality control. So this process indicates that you need to design your basically quality system based on how the testing process performs, how an assay performs, for example. If the assay is at 6 sigma or higher, you really don't need a lot of you don't need to run a lot of quality control. Whereas if you have lower sigma performance, 3S, 4S, or 5S, you need a different, a more careful review and assessment. Now, lower than 3 sigma is not recommended. So you should not be running a test if it does not meet 3 sigma or higher. Now, what are the components of quality assurance in a clinical lab? I mentioned, I wanted to also talk about the fact that you need to be aware of all 3 phases of the clinical lab process: pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical. So pre-analytical is actually a very common source of errors. And it's taught that almost 70% of errors occur before the sample is even analyzed in the lab. So careful attention to pre-analytical errors is really important. Also selecting the right test on the right patient. So lab scientists and lab professionals should be working with clinicians to ensure the right test is ordered on the right patient. Also, the test is appropriately utilized. There's a lot of overutilization. In some cases, underutilization of a specific test. For example, cardiac markers are thought to be underutilized, whereas there are a lot of other tests where they are overutilized. So the lab can essentially assist the clinical programs to ensure appropriate utilization. So, as I mentioned, a substantial body of evidence indicate that the major areas of improvement in lab medicine is actually the pre-analytical phase. Now, in terms of analytical phase, all labs must have a strict analytical quality assurance mechanisms to ensure that the data reported to patient charts is consistent, accurate, and well standardized. And this involves, of course, IQC, and I've already discussed in some detail quality control practices and the models that could be used. But also equally important is external quality assessment and ensuring that the methods that you use are traceable to some sort of reference material. So ensuring that appropriately calibrated methods are used. So don't just take any kit out there from any manufacturer and use it without ensuring that it's actually calibrated appropriately and traceable to some primary and secondary reference material. So while I've already mentioned QC, so you're familiar with many of these concepts. The Levin-Jennings chart is typically used to look at the performance of quality control. And it is an essential component of quality assessment in every lab. And typically in clinical chemistry, 2 or 3 levels are run, and they tend to be multi-parameter controls. So, but again, actually selecting the right control material is also important. You need to appropriately validate your quality control material before you use. And in Canada, IQMH, I mentioned, is Institute of Quality Management in Healthcare, is actually a government-run process that helps to accredit labs, but also provide guidelines for quality control, both internal QC as well as external. And all labs in Canada tend to use 2 to 3 levels of commercial QC. Many labs actually supplement this with in-house patient QC. And all labs tend to use established QC rules and limits to monitor results. For sake of time, I'm moving quickly, so I don't take too much time. Other quality models that have been proposed, I want to make sure I mention, actually, this is a model that's proposed by colleagues in Australia, and that is a patient-based real-time quality control. And this has actually become quite popular with many labs, and more and more labs are using this concept, using patient data basically to detect analytical errors for quality control purposes. So this, if you haven't read about it, I would recommend reading about this option, because you're sitting on a lot of data. Every lab has millions, if not hundreds of millions of data. So you can actually use your own data to assess control, quality assurance and quality control. Also, the upgrading multi-rules with moving average algorithms has been proposed as another approach, including commutable control that is analyzed once per day over a period of 6 months is another approach, and applying individual versus pooled means and SDs for multiple analyzers is actually practiced by many labs, not all, but many. And controlling differences between reagent loss, of course, is really important for every lab. Now, I've so far talked about internal quality control. External quality assurance is really important, and there are many programs out there, both own quality assurance program and external proficiency program. And there are guidelines on this from ISO and others. And they are intended to allow clinical labs to compare the closeness of their output or results against their peers. So it's really important to ensure that you understand whether the results that you're reporting is comparable to others using the same system, same reagent, same analyzer. And that requires external quality assurance. So if you do not have a national system or a regional system, then you want to make sure you become part of another program. And there are many programs, as you know, around the lab, the CAP, the Randox, Bio-Rad, the RCPA, QAP. But IFCC actually has recently begun a program trying to assist particularly developing countries. And we have started helping 10 countries this year where we are supporting external quality assurance in those countries at no cost. Now, there are many challenges with EQA. Lack of commutability of assay material is a major one, and requires grouping of instruments for performance analysis, can be challenging to derive meaningful conclusions based on number of participants. Many labs, particularly in developing countries, do not even perform EQA on a consistent basis. And the barriers are cost and lack of standardized guidelines on EQA. Most guidelines are actually focused on internal quality assurance rather than external, but it is equally important. So further guidelines are needed, but also costs need to be managed. And so IFCC, as I mentioned, has tried to help with this by creating an IFCC-sponsored EQA program to assist developing countries who cannot afford to subscribe to these programs. We've been actually helping in 10 countries, some in Asia, some in Eastern Europe, Africa, and South America. Now, I want to end by talking about post-analytical quality control, assurance. So quality assurance, I mentioned, is not only just analytical, it is pre-analytical, but also post-analytical, in the sense that you need to ensure that the lab results that you are reporting is appropriately interpreted. And to ensure appropriate interpretation, you need appropriate reference ranges. So do not forget about post-analytical quality. So reference intervals are referred to as health-associated benchmarks used to support clinical decision-making. And statistically, it's represented by the interval between two reference limits derived from a healthy reference population. And it is essential, as I mentioned, in clinical decision-making. As we speak, unfortunately, many labs who are doing excellent work analytically are reporting and interpreting results inappropriately because they're not using appropriate reference ranges. There have been many actually surveys done in Europe, in Canada, in other countries, where there has been evidence of significant errors in interpretation of lab results. So quality assurance of this process is really important. So I'm interested in pediatric reference intervals, and so I've given previously presentations on pediatric reference intervals and the Caliper program, but there are actually many studies. Fortunately, in the last 2 decades, there have been more studies establishing reference ranges in children. There's actually a big study in China called the PRINCESS study that we have collaborated with, but there are also other studies around the world, in Australia, in Canada, in Europe and elsewhere. And these are helping to provide data to support appropriate reference range and appropriate interpretation. And I want to emphasize that, especially in children, it's important that you have appropriate age-specific reference range and sex-specific reference range. So those who are not familiar with the Caliper program, I recommend going to the website. It is free to access. It's called caliperproject.org or .ca. And you can also go to the database called caliperdatabase.org. I don't have time to go through the details, but we have tested over 12,000 children and have established a database. Actually, many countries are currently using this database for routinely. So this is the database that I mentioned. Now, so in conclusion, quality assurance in clinical labs is essential throughout the testing process, including pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical, and future improvements are needed in the reduction of pre-analytical errors, increased communicability of reference standards, as well as the establishment of instrument-specific reference ranges for both chemistry and hematology assays. So thank you very much. I hope I didn't go too long, and happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Excellent. Let's give a round of applause to Professor Adley for his excellent talk.
Thank you.
So the topic of our next speaker is technical design to improve BS-600M performance. This topic is of great interest to us because every user, potential user, would like to know how the system is designed. Our speaker has a great depth of experience in this field because he is the R&D manager for the clinical chemistry system. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Ziling Sun for his interesting talk.
Thank you, Dr. Jenny's introduction. So I will share my screen. And it's really the great pleasure to share you the technical designs of BS-600M. And as we know, this year is the first year BS-600M was launched, and it has a powerful functions such as the high throughput per square meters, a continuous rack loader with 120 sample positions, integrated powerful direct IC module, and whole blood hemoglobin A1C with the enzymatic method, which has been discussed in previous ChemTalk. And if you are interested in this function, you can check out the link here to find more information. And today's topic I share is the performance design of 600M, focusing on its matrix performance. So in Professor Adler's speech, we know the concepts and application of sigma metric. And sigma is a composite statistical measures of methods total error, total precision, and bias. And here is the calculation formula of sigma metric. So it is equal to the difference of total allowable errors and bias, and then divided by the total precision. And generally, sigma matrix high greater than 3 is considered acceptable levels, and greater than 5 excellent levels, and greater than 6 sigma is a world-class level. And in 600M, 95% assays are greater than 5 sigmas, and 75% are greater than 6 sigmas. And you may wonder how do we achieve these levels. So today I will talk about it in 3 aspects. The first one is the signal acquisition method for photometers, and the second is the design and performance of the pipetting. And the last one is the guarantee of accuracy. Now let's move to the first aspect. It's the photometer and its signal acquiring method. So a chemistry analyzer can be solved as spectral photometers, which measure the absorbance in motion. So as this picture showed, when the reactor rotates counterclockwise, the cuvette will pass through the photometers from the red light to the gray light. And during this process, the photometer will collect the transmit light of the cuvette. And the times of the photometries can be calculated using the formula here. And T is equal to the width of the reaction cells minus 2 times of the thickness of the reaction cells, and the width of the beams, and then divided by the linear velocities of the reaction reactor. And generally, this time is very short and could be microseconds. And this increases the difficulty of photometry. And here is more details about how photometers work. So the halogen lamp is set as the light source, and this light is condensed on the reaction cells, and which is incubated at 67 degrees Celsius. And then after absorbed by the cuvettes and their contents, the light will pass through the lens and the slit. And then this light will stretch to the diffraction grating. And this diffraction grating will separate the light equally, and the light will be measured by the photodiodes. So the photodiodes here, you can see. And 600M has 16 photodiodes to detect 16 wavelengths, and ranging from the 340 nanometer to 850 nanometers. And when the light strikes to the photodiodes, it will be caught by the heart rays and therefore produce signals. So this slide shows how traditional photometer platforms and the brand new photometer platform in 600 work respectively. And as for the traditional photometer, due to the lack of the calculating ability of power rays, it generally uses serial signal acquisition method, and we can see different wavelengths occasionally acquire signal from light separated by diffraction grating. And while in 600M, 16 wavelengths are simultaneously measured. It increased the numbers of signals acquired in the short photometric terms and improved signal to noise ratio of each point on the reaction curve, and therefore producing different outcomes. And we can see the left picture shows a reaction curve from the traditional photometer. This curve is based on little data acquired from the primary and the secondary wavelengths. So we can see capture the signal from the primary and the secondary wavelengths. But while in 600M, the 16 wavelengths are measured and recorded parallelly. And so this pictures, as this picture shows, so this assay is the periods of the time when collected light, and the y-axis is the absorbance of the absorbance. And this different curve shows different represents one of the wavelengths curve. And in the curves, each point of the curve, we can see this picture shows the light signal collected at one point on the reaction curve. So the rising and the falling path indicates the light past the edge of the cuvette, and this middle path shows the signal acquired when the light passes through the flat areas of the cuvette. And data acquired from the middle path will be translated into the absorbance. And it expands the data size acquired for each point of the reaction curve from a few hundreds to some 100,000, an increase of nearly 1,000 times, and which will reduce the noise of the photometry to ensure the accuracy and reliability of every data points on the reaction curve. And the parallel signal acquisition not only reduces the noise of photometry, but also can be applied to deal with some exceptions. And this case I share is from a lattice enhanced turbidity matrix immunoassays, and whose measuring wavelength is 570 nanometers. And as we can see, this up picture shows the normal reactions, and we can see that the signal in the middle path is very flat. But this picture below shows the abnormal reactions. We can see abnormal peaks in the measuring periods, also in this measuring wavelengths. While this abnormal phenomenon doesn't appear into adjacent periods, so as we can see these periods and in these periods, so we can see abnormal peak in the adjacent periods. And this is the enlargements of this periods results. So we can see this abnormalities appear only in the measuring wavelengths, but not in other wavelengths. And because the signal of non-measured wavelengths is correlates with that of measured wavelengths, and the signals of the adjacent periods is correlates with that of measured periods. So this photometric data of adjacent periods and non-measured wavelengths can be used to monitor the quality of data and hit off the exception. And besides what I mentioned above, the parallel signal acquisitions also help to avoid the interference of air bubbles. So reagents are stored in the reaction chambers at 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. So during the test, the reaction is transferred to the reaction lattice. So the solubility of gas dissolved in the reaction will decrease due to the temperature increase to 37 degrees Celsius. And you can refer to the Henry's law. And the released gas may form the air bubbles on the cuvettes. So this may affect the directions of the reactions. And generally, chemistry analyzer reduce the effects of bubble by 2 wavelengths. So we measure the 2 wavelengths to eliminate the effects of the bubbles. But however, the interference of the bubbles cannot be completely eliminated due to the time delays in the serial acquisition between the primary and secondary wavelengths. And whilst 600 parallel acquisition can solve this problem, as we can see these figures, the primary wavelengths and secondary wavelengths of the direction is consistent, so it can eliminate the effects of the bubble. So let's move to the second aspect. The second aspect I would like to talk about the excellent performance of 600M is the pipetting. And it has 3 advantages. The first one is the high precision, second one is less carryover, and the third one is capable of detecting abnormality. And I will talk about this in orders. The first one, high precision. As this picture shows, after aspiration from the liquids, the probes after surface will carry some liquids, and which will affect the pipetting precision. So as this green light figure showed, the more liquid it carries, the worse the reparability is. And what we found is there is a positive link between the size of needle tip and the amount of liquid carriers, as this red light figure showed. And BS-600M is equipped with the optimal probes which greatly optimize these issues and provide precise pipetting. And here is the evaluations of 600M pipetting precisions. And 9 machines are involved in this study. And a soluble dye in water orange G is used to evaluate the pipetting precision. And as we can see in this figure, the result turned out the pipetting precision of 600M is quite good. It's within 1% and ranging from the 1.5 to 45 microliter. So now we will go through the second strength, the less carryover. And errors caused by carryover of analytics from different sample types is a great barriers of chemistry analyzer. And one case is carryovers of whole blood to plasma or serum. And the concentrations of lactase, dehydrogenase, phosphates, potassium ions, and aspartase aminotransferase in red blood cell are much higher than those in plasma and serum. And after the pipette takes the red blood cell, its contents may remain on the insides of the needles and can be carried to the next text. And 600 equals with the needles whose inner surface are mirror polished, as we can see in these pictures. This is the sections of the needles, and we can see the inner surface is smooth than others. And also, this will help to reduce the carryover. So as this table shows, this is a carryover studies of whole blood to plasma, and we can see the combination is lower than the acceptance. So this also helps to reduce the requirements of special washing. And in addition, the carryovers of assays integrated in 600M are checked by pairwise screening according to the expert consensus. And the carryover relationship is recorded in software database with special washing and optimal test order. And 600M carryover manager system is able to minimize carryovers and avoid false diagnosis caused by cross carryover. And the third strength is the abilities of abnormality detecting in pipetting. And this picture shows a case of serum cloned up to suppression. And when the sample tip is inverted, we can see very little serum will flow onto the tube cap. And we can see a jelly-like clot here. And this may occur and generally comes from serums with short reaction time after blood collection, and serums from patients who are incongruous with heparin, and serums from patients with plasmatic cell disease. And 600M pipetting pressure detecting module can monitor the pressure aspiration process and to detect whether there is clot, as this figure shows. And this green line shows the time for the preparations for aspiration. And this yellow line shows the time when the syringe began to aspirate. And so we can see a negative pressure here. So it's lower than the average level. And from this yellow line to this purple line, it is a complete aspiration process. And in this process, pressure limitations will apply to detect whether there is a clot. So as this figure shows, this green line is a pressure aspirations detection from the clone specimens, and this blue line is the normal specimen. So because it's lower than the limitations of the pressure, so it was detected as the clone specimen. And when a clone is found, the system will stop the text and provides a clot flag. And then we'll jump to another sample text to avoid and report inaccurate results. And also this pipetting pressures detecting module is applied to detect the air bubbles in aspiration. And next part, I will go through this aspect, and is the guarantees of accuracy both within and beyond the linear range in 600M. And as we know, the accuracy of samples within linear range is guaranteed by the traceability, and Mindray's reference laboratory is accredited by JCTOM and the CNAS. And we will have a series of standard procedure to ensure the result of every specimen is standardized against the reference procedure and materials. And 600M also follow these procedures and targets values of each batch of the calibrator will well verified before leaving the factory. And also Mindray spare no efforts to participate in every proficiency testing program to ensure the accuracy of every reported results. And every year, Mindray's reference lab participate in the RELA scheme, and the result turned out to be excellent. And we can see the results in the middle among the participants. And also this year, hemoglobin A1C on 600M has received NGSP and IFCC certification. And next point is how 600M ensure the accuracy beyond the linear range. And assays on clinical chemistry analyzers are adapted to meet the need of routine clinical laboratory operations. And however, occasionally specimens from patients in certain pathological conditions will have extremely high analytics concentration that far exceeds the assay's upper limit. And these specimens may be in abnormal situation during tasks, such as substrate depletion, oxygen shortage, and hook effects. And 600M closed system is built with powerful software algorithms, such as the substrate depletion handlings, oxygen shortage detection, Poisson handlings. And as for the substrate depletion handling, if the substrate depletion is detected, these algorithms will optimize the read window to capture the appropriate signal to report the correct results. And we can see this if we detect in this slide is the substrate we found. And when the substrate is found, the read window will move to these regions. And this will help to report the correct test result in the first round. And as for oxygen shortage and hook effects, algorithms are applied to monitor the reaction kinetic for abnormality and provide flags and trigger autoruns to specimen with abnormal situation in text. And all this has been well discussed in previous ChemTalk by Dr. Jenny. And if you are interested, you can check out this link. And what's more, 600M has a function of smart dilution, which can support multi-level dilution and automatically select the optimal dilution terms according to the fact of the first text. And I take the microalbumins as an example. And we know the distributions of microalbumins concentration is wide. In healthy people's microalbumin is very low, generally lower than 20 microgram per liter. But in patients with renal disease, it could be very high, even approaching the level of plasma. And the conventional microalbumin linear range can only cover 87% samples. And in traditional practice, sample higher than the linear range must be diluted manually. And while in 600M, 2 levels of dilutions are preset. And we can see this is 2 levels of the dilutions. And it will select the optimal dilution terms according to the fact of the first test result. And if the first test result is just higher than the linear range, but no hood effects occurred, a greater flag will be labeled and a 30-time dilution will be automatically performed. And if a hook effect is detected by the Poisson handling algorithms, a pro flag will be labeled and a 100 times dilution test will be performed. And the reportable range of microalbumin in BS-600 after the second automatically dilution can cover 99.8% specimens. And this will reduce the frequency of manual and the second time dilutions. Moreover, algorithms with small dilutions help to ensure the accuracy of reported results. And at the end of the speech, I'd like to give you a brief summary of Mindray's 600M strengths. And first, photometer with parallelized signal acquisition improve the signal-to-noise ratio and reduce interference from the abnormality, such as air bubbles. And second, optimal pipettings provide high precision, less carryover, and abnormality detection. And third, guarantee of accuracy from both within and beyond linear range. The accuracy within linear range is guaranteed by standard traceability, and algorithms with smart dilutions are built to ensure the accuracies of results beyond the linear range. So our BS-600 solution is powerful yet efficient. It not only improves working efficiency, saves costs, but also delivers reliable results. And we strive to make the most advanced diagnosis solution acceptable to you. Thank you.
That was a very interesting talk. Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Ziling San for his excellent talk.
Thanks, Dr. Jin.
Our next speaker is Mr. Chang-Sik Seo. He is a marketing and sales manager and Star Korea. Is a evaluation. His topic is BS-600M performance evaluation. Before his talk, we would like to play a short video clip from SQ Lab of Korea, where the performance evaluation was conducted.
We SQ Lab were established for commercial purposes for sample testing in 2011 and have been striving for accuracies of inspections such as various certifications as CDC and SQAP, a CAP survey, plus KSLM and IS 9001. Currently, our lab processes 3,000 to 4,000 samples for immunological and biochemical tests, and the main analyzer is the COBAS 8000 TLA system. In addition, it has recently been approved by the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety as a clinical performance testing institution for in vitro diagnostic medical device in 2020 and has various clinical evaluation experiences. To this end, we operate a variety of analysis equipment and recently conducted exploratory analysis and evaluation of BS-600M in cooperation with Mindray and Medistar. BS-600M shows good performance and good correlation with COBAS 8000 system. Thank you.
All right. So Mr. Chang-Sik Seo, that's your turn.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dai, to well introduce about me. And please share my screen to start the presentation. Yeah, and I will introduce design and method and result and summary in order. And first, the study of design, and then our objective. The study is intended to evaluate the analytical performance of Mindray 600M clinical chemistry system. And also we consider total 20 parameters on this study, and each contents follow the CLSI guide protocol after talking with Mindray R&D. So we studied precision, accuracy, and method comparison, and linearity on the for the below 20 parameters. And the next is method. Before explaining the study method, let me tell you about the overview of used instrument. The use of the subject of this study, Mindray 600M, the test throughput, everybody knows very well, the 600 photometric test per hours, and then with ISC 800 tests per hours. And the samples, 120 samples by 12 lakhs, the sample continuous loading possible, and then stat sample can be loading. And this system can support whole blood HbA1c test and 80 position region with cooling system. And the compared instrument Roche Cobas 8000 system, the throughput is up to 2,000 tests per hour, and the samples, the serum, plasma, urine, CSF can be supported, and the automated sample rerun and dilution. And up to 70 reagent cassette position can support, and also the cassette, the RFID label. For the HbA1c compared instrument, Biorad D100 HPLC system, the currently HPLC system technique is considered as a good standard for HbA1c analysis. The performance evaluations. The first is precision and accuracy, linearity, method comparisons. The precision is applied to CLSI Ep4 the guide to study use the reagent manufacturer, the Mindray's control, 5 days and 1 batch, and 5 replicates to obtain the between 1 precisions. And accuracy. Accuracy study used the calibrator as the material and 3 times measurement and obtaining the data to calculate the bias. Linearity. Linearity, actually, we use the commercially linearity material and their analysis system. The company name is LGC Clinical Diagnostics, and the brand name is Validate. Also we CLSI the documents EP6 A2 evaluation of the linearity of quantitative measurement procedure, and the data analysis used by their own software MSDRX. And the method comparisons. Method comparison is applied to the CLSI EP09A3 guide to study. Use the fresh sample, and all samples have been tested using other analyzer Cobas 8000 and D100. Each samples tested 2 times. The result and summary. Our within precision result, this one, and then it shows each parameter's test result graph with the CV% and 1/4 total arrival error, or assays that shows less than our standard, that 1/4 total arrival error. It is total precision result out during 5 days, 1 batch, 5 replicates. It shows each parameter's test result graph with CV%, and then 1/3 total arrival error from the total precision data. Most assays shows less than or near of 2% CV value, but the ALP only near the 4%. We think ALP the precisions than other parameters because it's just our guess the onboard stability. On this research, we just review for full parameters, so we cannot calculate about the ALP specific precisions. Nevertheless, the total researched parameters are less than 1/3 total arrival error. It is accurate result. They calculated from the target value, and each bias less than 4% is good. This is the sigma assessment result from our data. We calculated sigma metrics, and then 80 items achieved the 6 sigma level, and all 20 items over the 4 sigma level. It shows that the performance of 600M with Mindray region is very good. Linearity for the ALT and the total protein can be approved from the Mindray requirements, and uric acid and glucose, and here the HbA1c. This study, we can confirm the linearity from the Mindray insert sheet, the 4 to 1000 U per liter, but the validate range, we can confirm until the 3700 U per liter around. It's very wide. And also the glucose and HbA1c also can be validated until the Mindray standards. Method comparisons. We compared 600M and Cobas 8000 system with serum samples, and ALT shows good correlation. Total protein also good correlation, but a little bit the positive bias. Albumin, total bilirubin, direct bilirubin slope is lower than 1x because the high value minus bias, especially over the 15 milligram per deciliters. ALP, total cholesterol, triglyceride, TG, sorry, HDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. LDL cholesterol shows good correlation from this study, but we have experienced during this compare that the data different, and we confirmed some data problem from the Cobas 8000 system. According to our further considerations about total cholesterol and the HDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterol testing, the data shows difference, the calculated value from HDL and LDL cholesterol. And we can confirm the difference from the both system, BS-600M and the Cobas 8000. So we think the Cobas 8000 system may be big difference than BS-600M. So finally and shortly, we conclude BS-600M system is better than Cobas 8000 system on the LDL cholesterol result. Uric acid, urea, creatine shows good correlations. CK, calcium, and magnesium was good. Phosphorus was good correlation. But when we compare the high level, example, over the 10 milligram per deciliter, have poor correlation. So we might more consider about this. So we have tried high level samples dilute at the table and calculate multiple fold to confirm. So we think BS-600M result is more unstable than the Cobas 8000. Example, some difference 12 and 10, but the Cobas system, most of result less than 5%. And glucose, hemoglobin A1C shows good. Okay, the conclusion. The summarize the good design and small spaces BS-600M has good benefit in Korean market, and our the study result has good on the precision, accuracy, linearity, and correlations. Especially the ALT and AST linearity result make good benefit for without diluted rerun testing, and the lipid panel data is more stable than Cobas 8000 system. Now, however, the phosphorus high value samples might improve to avoid the dilution rerun test. Finally, we Medista really appreciate to Mindray and the people involved in supporting this research. Thank you.
That was very interesting talk. Thanks. Let's give a round of applause to Mr. Jiang Sik-seo.
Thank you.
Now we are running into the question and answer section. Well, we do have a question for Dr. Adeli. Let me see. Oh, it disappeared. It was asking derive the mean versus the reference mean, the difference.
Yeah, Dr. Dai, I typed answers to, there were a few questions. I answered them in writing. So I don't know if there are still remaining questions. I'll be happy to answer.
Oh, okay.
I answered them in the chat, in the Q&A.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Right.
In the audience, any additional question for each of the speakers? All right. If there's no further questions, I will conclude the meeting here. And thank you very much for joining this meeting. And thank you, Dr. Adel. Thank you, Mr. Zillingson. Thank you, Jiang Sik-seo, for the excellent talks. So I will sharing a QR code for the attendance if you would like to have, if you like to have, let me see. Oh, John Sixway, could you please share so I can share? All right. So if you want to have a attendance sheet, you can send your, you scan this QR code and then you complete a survey and we will send you a certificate attendance. Thanks everyone for this really successful session. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.